Morning. Mark, come join me here. There we go. Well, good morning, everybody. The month of May marks National Foster Care Month, an opportunity to recognize youth in care and the foster parents who provide safe and loving homes for them. Here in Illinois, each year we mark this month by inviting young people who are in care of the state to shadow the decision makers in our capital. That's taking place today. They have the opportunity to follow legislators and, starting this year, the governor. While we hope that these young people learn more about the work that we do, it's also important for us to learn from them. We need to do a lot more listening in this building. Most elected leaders are not experts in child welfare. We are public servants deeply committed to doing what's right for all the children of our state and committed to listening and learning from those willing to help. We need to listen to our youth in care and alumni who have been through the system. There is no one who can better tell us what works and what doesn't work than those that we're trying to serve. This afternoon, I will be sitting down with all the young people who came here today, and I look forward to that conversation. We also need to listen to the caseworkers at DCFS, those who are on the ground every day to serve and to protect our most vulnerable children and families. As governor, I've sat down with caseworkers in Chicago and in Springfield to understand the full scope of their work. Those meetings are continuing. We also need to heed the words of leaders who have devoted their careers to this work, and nonprofits and advocates in this field, and experts like Chapin Hall, who know the ins and outs of our system and other states' systems across the nation. 6 weeks ago, I appointed new leadership at DCFS, announcing that Mark Smith would serve as our new director at DCFS, and I tasked Chapin Hall with a top-down review of Intact Family Services, the arm of DCFS that is tasked with keeping our families together. I asked Chapin Hall to look at the full scope of the work that Intact does to serve vulnerable children and their families, and to come back with actionable recommendations. They finished their work, and they gave me a thorough briefing. I had many questions, and they did a thorough job answering those questions. I'm truly grateful to Brian Samuels, to Dana Weiner, and to the entire team at Chapin Hall for their truly critical work. Their report has revealed long-standing structural, procedural, and cultural issues in how Intact Family Services functions. Among the major issues were ineffective supervisory structure, inadequate procedures for closing high-risk cases, significant communication gaps, and investigative staff lacking clarity in their roles. These challenges are the result of many years of misguided decisions, underdeveloped program rollouts, and unacceptable funding cuts. There is nowhere in Illinois government that has been more hollowed out than DCFS. And there's nowhere in state government where those cuts have done more damage. I wish I could stand up here and say that there's a quick fix, that we have the magic potion that will instantly undo years of systematic issues and will suddenly make this all right. I know that Mark and the team at Chapin Hall want that too, along with all the stakeholders, lawmakers, and advocacy groups who stand up for children every single day. But urgency is required. We have the opportunity right now to make dramatic improvements in how DCFS functions and to commit ourselves every day to improving on this work. Much of what's required will take time to implement, so we've already begun. The recommendations provided by Chapin Hall amount to an overhaul of Intact Family Services. I'm committed to carrying out that overhaul as quickly and effectively as possible, and ensuring that Mark has the necessary resources and support to do that work. Much of the work is already underway, and some will be completed over the next several weeks. Responses to other recommendations require plans to be developed, and that planning and implementation will take place over the next several months. I want to be clear. We will be adopting every recommendation in this report with as much expediency as possible. When the experts completed their presentation of the report to me, my first question was, what can we do right now? What actions can be taken right now to better protect vulnerable children who may be in harm's way today? I'm pleased to say that Acting Director Mark Smith and his team have responded to that in a way that I believe will have an immediate impact. DCFS is carrying out a review of 1,100 open investigations to revisit the determinations that were made and to take any additional steps to protect those children. DCFS is also launching a crisis intervention team, which frankly should have existed long ago. This team will be called into immediate action in response to certain cases where we face the loss of a child. They will review the full scope of the agency's work in these cases, as well as other cases handled by those involved, and importantly, they'll provide recommendations as to how we can prevent similar potential tragedies in the future. These immediate actions are part of our larger, multi-pronged approach to reimagine the Department of Children and Family Services in Illinois, and it includes acting on the other recommendations of Chapin Hall: new training and retraining, 126 additional caseworkers, and technology upgrades. These action items are just a start, the first steps along a path to keeping children more secure, to giving them a brighter future, to keeping our state's promises to them. I'm committing the full force of this office to this work. This agency and the children under its care were neglected for years. That changes right now. There is nothing more important to me as governor than protecting our state's most vulnerable people, especially our children. Now I'm pleased to turn it over to someone who has devoted his life to child welfare in Illinois and who will be leading our efforts to reshape DCFS, and that's Acting Director Mark Smith. Mark.
Governor, thank you. Thank you for your administration's commitment to supporting DCFS and standing together with us as we strive to better serve vulnerable children and families across the state of Illinois. Chapin Hall has given us a glimpse of where we have been and where we need to go. The recommendation in this report serves as a strong guide for change. I'm grateful to the governor for giving us this roadmap to the future. As a new director, I have been given the opportunity to hit the ground running. Today is one step, but one report and one press conference won't fix the long-standing challenges of this department. But I am committed to moving forward and taking steps each day to begin the problem solving and addressing the issues that are plaguing DCFS and have impacted too many lives. As the governor mentioned, today is Youth and Care Shadow Day in the Capitol. Last night I had the privilege to meet with many of these young people. I talked with them about their own experiences and how my decisions as a director will impact them. What I took away from that evening was inspiration. While this report shines a light on the path forward, the lives of the children and the young people we serve propel us to make progress. We can't do this alone. This report is a way to collaborate with lawmakers, with the courts, and with our non-for-profit partners. We owe it to the children and families that we serve. Thank you again to the governor, his team, the legislators, our community partners, and the staff at DCFS for your support on this journey.
Happy to take any questions that you may have.
What kind of investment are you talking about? You've got a very bold agenda here. You've got 126 new caseworkers coming. What, can you put a price tag on this for taxpayers? I know that's not the overriding concern, but taxpayers do want to know what it's going to cost to get things right.
No, the overriding concern here is the safety of these children. There are recommendations here that are about policies and procedures, and there are recommendations about caseloads and personnel. And there is a cost to some of the latter half of that. The policies and procedures, to develop them, there will be a minor cost, but we need to make sure we develop and implement them. That is not a majority of cost to the taxpayers. As you may know, in my budget that I proposed for FY 2020, there's a $75 million additional request in the budget for DCFS. I also specifically have called for 126 additional caseworkers to be added. But the Chapin Hall work is comprehensive. It helps us to focus where we would put resources. The $75 million additional dollars that we're putting into DCFS will help us to approach that. And of course, within DCFS, there'll be prioritization based upon our discussion today, what Chapin Hall has brought to us, and our need to focus on the most vulnerable of our children.
Just to follow up, with the consent decree, one of the things that has been realized in the last few weeks is that the consent decree for years, the 15 new cases a month for investigators, hasn't been adhered to.
Right.
And that's one thing that taxpayers will say, this is a federal consent decree, we can't even abide by that. Can you promise that those things are going to be followed?
That is absolutely a goal of ours. You know that there are consent decrees that were brought on in prior administrations, that when I came into office, I looked at all of them and said, how do we begin to follow the recommendations, the requirements of those consent decrees to make sure that we're doing what's necessary, and not just at DCFS, but at other agencies too, so that we can take the burden of that consent decree off of an agency and do what's right for the people that are being served. So we're absolutely focused on that here at DCFS as well.
Governor, Director, this agency has been fouled up since Dad was...
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of your
The
question.
agency's been fouled up since Dad was a little boy, or at least since the three of us were little boys. And how can the people of Illinois be assured that you two are the right two to do it, and this plan's the right plan, after so much tragedy?
What I can assure you is that this is of highest priority for our office, to make sure that we are protecting our most vulnerable children. We have an actual plan that's been put forward, recommendations that have been put forward. We're developing the policies and procedures that will need to be implemented. There are things that are already happening to make change. We have been transparent about each one of the circumstances that have been, that have been reported upon, and we're going to continue to do that. What I can promise you is that a day will not go by in my administration where we are not thinking about and making real advances forward to try to protect these children all across our state.
Director, you weigh in on the same question? The Director weigh in on this?
I think that what my commitment is to the people of the state of Illinois is that we are going to work tirelessly to try to address these issues that are opportunities for us to work and improve the way we service the children and the families that we're tasked to support. When you ask, how do we know if I'm the right person for the job or if the governor is the right person for the job, I know from my perspective, because I'm going to work with all the people who are part of this system. I'm going to work with the experts in our private sector, with the experts within DCFS, with our support systems from the legislators and the ACLU, and everybody who can partner and help us think about this work in a way that will move us forward. I'm committing to that. I'm committing to us doing the best work that we possibly can I'm committed to us supporting the people who are in the field. And I think that with that focus, with that dedication, we can move the system forward.
I know, but what are the, you should go. All right, so data shows that caseworkers are overloaded with cases. Supervisors are also overloaded with cases. You have a number of open positions. How are frontline staff and supervisors supposed to take days off for training, review more than 1,000 cases, and still make sure that the children that they're currently investigating are safe when we're having trouble just making sure that the kids that are in their care now are safe? How are they supposed to do all of that?
I want to ask that to prior administrations too. I think those are excellent questions. And the answer for me anyway is let's bring transparency. Let's make sure that we're addressing each one of the challenges that you raised, that we have new caseworkers, that we have better training, that we have that we fill the positions that are available, and that we're actually addressing, starting with the most vulnerable cases, so that we can protect our children. Look, there's a lot of work to do here. There's no doubt about it. And this isn't, as I said earlier, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. We're not going to fix it overnight. What we can do is start with the things that are most urgent and make sure, and I say this about lots of things across state government, that we have short-term, medium-term, and long-term challenges that we have to overcome, but we can't wait for the medium-term challenges and long-term challenges to start addressing. We have to start addressing all three of those categories on day one, because they're medium-term because they take time, and long-term because they take time, but you have to start now. So we're making that effort now. We're doing everything that we can. Look, I want to impart an answer to the last question and to yours. Taking on the job of being leader of DCFS is a very difficult challenge. There are a lot of people who would shy away from that challenge. Mark Smith is not only highly qualified, but he is jumping into the fire. He is the person running into the problem to fix it. He knows it because he's been a frontline and he's been a manager. He's been in a number of different positions to see it from different angles. He understands intact family services well. And I will say that working with outside help, advocates, researchers, Mark is listening and he is moving forward with great expediency, expeditiousness, and I'm standing with him in that effort. And as I said, the governor's office very much involved. We want to make sure that everything gets done to protect these children. It is a tragedy, and it's a tragedy that is unacceptable to me. One of the questions that I asked to Chapin Hall was how do we stop? I mean, truly just end the number of neglected, abused, and the deaths that occur. And the answers they give are you can only move in a direction. It's something that you have to work down over time. And that you've got to prioritize and then work on each one of those things ratably, because it took years to get in the situation that we're in, and it's going to take some time to get out of it.
How does the crisis intervention team work? Director, one of your associates testified a few weeks ago that when A.J. Friend told the emergency room doctor that that was a missed check, that when the emergency room doctor was told by A.J. that he had been beaten by a belt, that a child abuse expert should have been brought in. It sounds like there's already a process. How that opportunity was missed. How do you know when to bring in a crisis intervention team in the future? How is that going to fix a problem like what happened with AJ?
So I think when we set up things like the crisis intervention team, and when we talk about the idea of training, these are things that we use to enhance our day-to-day delivery. So we use our crisis intervention team to learn what mistakes were made, what things did we do well, and then we make that a part of the way that we inform our practice. It's critical that the staff who work in the homes with our children and families have the strongest understanding of how to make decisions. And we take our time to put them through training and through additional training. So they ensure that they're keeping the newest and best practices in the way that they're delivering services. We use things like the crisis intervention team to help us self-evaluate to see how we move forward. So the next time we have a child or the next time we're intervening with the family, we take steps forward in making the best decisions for those families we can.
So it's heightened from what you already have a process.
I'm sorry.
They already have a process. This is an enhanced process, or?
Can you repeat that?
You already have a process. It sounded like there should have been an intervention at that time under current policy. This crisis intervention team, is it just a new name? Is it?
I think if I may say, I think the crisis intervention team is designed to look at the worst case, the case where there has been a child who's lost, who's died. But here's what's important about it: to examine what didn't work, what happened in the situation, and then to incorporate new policy or change procedure as a result of what happened. That's never happened before.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
I'm apples and oranges.
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Should there be criminal penalties levied against people who, in DCFS, may falsify reports or who may, drop the ball when a child says that they were abused and leading up to, recent cases? Should there be some kind of criminal prosecution to send a message to people who may, unfortunately be overwhelmed, but who may, either be neglecting their duties?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that question. I mean, what we want to do is prevent it, stop it. We want to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So I don't know whether that, what we want to look at is that the most deterrent factor, or is training, for example, a more deterrent factor? Because let me just explain to you something. I have discovered that because of the vast understaffing, that it is often the case people get hired and they get put right out on the line. They're front line, knocking on doors, talking to people where reports have been made, and very little training. Maybe they were given a handbook and a discussion. We need to make sure there's more training involved here. So I think that, to me anyway, that's something that I think will make an enormous difference. And that's part of what has been discussed by Chapin Hall.
But don't the lives of these children who have been lost demand some kind of action, some kind of...
That's what we're doing. It's what we're doing, honestly. We're looking at all of it. Without reaching all of the conclusions today, we are taking recommendations from people who actually work in the field, who've been experts for years in the field, and we're putting them into practice. And that's the most important thing we can do right now, is to follow the experts.
Recommendation number 7 on this list says work with courts and state's attorneys to refine the criteria for child removal in complex and chronic family cases. One of the criticisms I've heard lately is that the state seems to have placed such value on keeping families intact at the expense of removing a child when that really needs to happen. Yeah. So do you think, what do you mean by refine? When should a child be removed? And has the state, failed on that, because they wanted so badly, DCFS wanted so badly to keep families together? Is that misguided?
So I think when we talk about that issue, we have to come together as a system to ensure that we're making decisions for each individual family to address what's best for each individual family. So we don't want there to be a culture of making decisions to take children. We don't want there to be a culture of making decisions to leave children at home. We want the culture to be make decisions based on what's best for the individual child and family, where their safety and risk are taken into consideration about the outcome. When we talk about working with the court system and the state's attorney's office, it's to try to make sure that we have a firm understanding of what role they play in this process, from the removal of a child from their family to the court service supporting us in monitoring and encouraging the family when they're together. We think that when we think about partnerships and we think about the way we work together, that's the best way that we can effectively ensure the safety and support the children and families.
But you say a culture, you don't want a culture of either one or the other, but you're a lifelong DCFS person. Do you think there has been a culture of, leave the child with their family no matter, unless it's the worst of the worst?
I would say no. I think that the culture has been safety. I think that people make decisions based on what they see, and the reason why we're working on our training and working on our policies is to ensure that the people who are making these decisions have a level of guidance and support that moves us in the proper direction.
Where's the recruitment of foster parents? I mean, that's going to be critical. And Illinois, as I understand, is woefully bad at getting foster parents.
So recruiting of foster parents is a project that we're working on right now. We're working with community partners to help us develop a plan to move forward with recruitment. I think that there are a lot of people out there who want to do what they can to help their communities and help individual families, and we want to make sure that in partnership with our private sector and our public sector that we have a path to bring these well-meaning, wonderful people into our system. I think that it's, in the past, it's been sporadic about the way we reach out to people, but we're going to be very thoughtful in how we do that, and we're going to tap into people's expertise to bring people to the door.
So the crisis intervention team, I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. That's supposed to look at deaths after they happen and figure out what went wrong and what can go better. What difference would that be between the OIG's office and the crisis intervention team? Wouldn't you just use those?
It's immediate. It's immediate. An OIG report is not immediate. The idea is to take all of the learnings from a specific circumstance, the things that we learn ratably, perhaps every day or week after this occurs, to determine what is it that we need to do better going forward. That I think is a primary purpose of having crisis intervention team. It's on the spot, people who know the system very well, right, may even know the circumstances, but who are looking into all of it to determine what should we be changing.
Is it time to revisit privatization?
It's a broad question that I guess and there certainly are debates about this question. What I will tell you is that with proper oversight, there are many states that have outside providers that provide care here. What I'll tell you is that the right kind of oversight, I asked Chapin Hall this question too, with the right kind of oversight, with the right kinds of policies and procedures, it can be done well. But I think they would say, and you should certainly contact, I think they would say that it hasn't yet been, the policies and procedures for oversight have not been, from the very beginning, put in place. And so that's part of what we're visiting as a result of their recommendations.
If I may ask in general, you've got 14 days before the scheduled end of the session. You've got May, you've got infrastructure, you've got tax changes, you've got marijuana, gambling. How are you going to get all this done in 2 weeks? Are you going to go into June?
16 days, Bernie. Let's not cut it short here. As you know better than I do, quite a lot tends to come down to the month of May. And so there's a lot of conversation that's going on right now about each one of these issues. Actually, I feel quite good about our prospects for getting everything passed in this month. Ongoing conversations where there's some negotiation that needs to take place. And I'm continuing to, my door's open to those folks who want to come in and talk about a particular provision. But no, I feel pretty good about where we are. But you have more experience than I do at what May should look like. I can just say that I see a lot of progress,
Governor, before John asked a good question about the money. We're hearing about the 4, 5, 6% budget cuts this year and next year, and agencies have been asked to trim. How do you square that with the DCFS financial needs of the plans you're talking about? And by the way, don't raise my taxes.
Thank you. I'm not sure what your income level is, but I'm trying to cut your taxes. With the fair tax. Let me just say that we're always looking for efficiencies within our agencies. Indeed, each one of the directors that I brought on across my entire cabinet, I've had that conversation with. When you show up at work, I need you to start on day one thinking about where there are inefficient processes or inefficient spending that's taking place, and we should find ways to serve more people with the same amount of money, or serve the same number of people for less money. And obviously DCFS, though, is an area where, as I said in my remarks, government has been truly hollowed out in a way that is obviously resulting in terrible neglect, abuse, and even death. And so this is an area where I proposed an increase in the budget, and I think you saw that I was very focused on some very specific things, most of it having to do with our children, most of it having to do with education, and DCFS is one example of an area that I wanted to focus on, but these were not across the board, increases anywhere. We're looking to make very focused kind of efficiencies realized, as well as obviously we've got a large structural deficit that we've got to cover. But there's nothing more important than focusing on our most vulnerable people in the state of Illinois. That's one of the things a budget is supposed to do, and that's why I focused on DCFS. That's why we're here today. I want everybody in the state to know, I want all of you to know that there's really nothing more important than protecting our children.
Proposals for the firearm owner identification card include increasing the fee, I think it's $50, shortening the duration of the license or the card instead of 5 years from 10, but it would also require fingerprinting for anybody who wants to get a firearm owner identification card. Do you support that idea? It's in the House, and if so, why should law-abiding citizens have to do something criminals do when they get arrested in order to exercise their Second Amendment rights?
We're continuing to look at that legislation. Suffice to say that there's a lot of legislation that is floating around. We've got some very high priorities that I talked about today, including the budget, including all the major pieces, fair tax, for example. And so that's what I really have my mind focused on right now. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.